She was the oldest living thing in the room. That was not unusual for her. She had been the oldest living thing in most rooms for the past 400 years. When you reached 943 years of age, you stopped expecting rooms that contained your peers, because your peers were gone, and the people who had known your peers were gone, and the people who had studied your peers were retired or gone. And what remained was a succession of younger and younger faces looking at you, with the specific quality of people who understood intellectually that they were in the presence of something very old, and could not fully close the distance between that intellectual understanding and the felt experience of it. She did not hold this against them. She had been 23 once. She remembered what it felt like to be in the presence of something old and to not be able to feel it properly. Her name was Archivist Sova Vel, and she was Vorath, and she had been the Vorath hegemony's senior living historical witness for the past 311 years, which was a title that the hegemony had created specifically for her because the standard archival titles had stopped being accurate around her 600th year and something more precise had been required. Senior living historical witness meant she was there, not that she had studied the records, not that she had analyzed the accounts, that she had been present, in the same air, in the same rooms, during the events that everyone else now knew only from documents. She had been there 940 years ago, when humanity went quiet. She had been 23. She was the only living being in the galaxy who had been an adult when it happened. The room she was in now was the Concord Joint Assembly's historical consultation chamber, which was a smaller and less formal space than the main assembly chamber, and which was used for sessions that required a different quality of attention than the formal vote procedures allowed. It had 12 chairs arranged in a rough circle, and no raised platform, and no formal recording system, beyond a single dedicated archivist in the corner, because the Joint Assembly's historical consultation sessions had learned through experience that the quality of what witnesses shared was inversely related to the formality of the recording environment. 11 people had come to hear her. She had been asking to be heard for 900 years. Not continuously, not desperately. She had made the request 417 times across 9 centuries, through the appropriate channels, through the formal petition process, through the historical consultation request system that the Concord had established precisely for situations where living witnesses had information relevant to current decisions. She had made the request precisely, with proper documentation, and she had been patient about the responses, which had ranged across 9 centuries from polite deferral to genuine engagement, to bureaucratic misplacement, to the specific quality of dismissal that institutions produced when a request had been in the system long enough that it had accumulated a history of previous deferral, and the history of deferral itself became a reason for further deferral. She had never been angry about it. She had been sad about it sometimes. Mostly she had been patient because patience was what 900 years produced when you understood that the world moved slowly, and that slow movement was not the same as no movement. 11 people today. She had prepared for 11 people the same way she had prepared for every previous consultation, which was to organize what she knew into the sequence that she had determined, through 900 years of consideration, was the most accurate sequence, and to tell it as clearly as she could. She told them, "I want to start by telling you what I am not going to tell you. I am not going to tell you that I know why humanity is going to end their silence. I do not know that. I do not know when. I do not know what the signal will be. What I know is why they went quiet, which I was present for, and what the quiet has meant for 900 years, which I have observed, and what I believe it means for what comes next, which is my assessment and not a fact, and I will be clear about which is which throughout." The Assembly's chair, a young Kelvari diplomat named Director Sovintar, told her, "Archivist Vel, we appreciate your patience with this process. I want to acknowledge that this request has been pending for a significant period." She told him, 417 requests across 900 years, but I appreciate the acknowledgement. He looked at her. He had the quality of someone who had heard that number and was doing the arithmetic and arriving at the weight of it. She told him, I was not angry. I want you to know that. Institutional processes move at the speed they move. What I want you to understand is not that the process failed. It is that the information I have been trying to share has been available for 900 years and is more relevant now than it has ever been. And the reason it is more relevant now is what I would like to explain. She folded her hands in her lap. She had very old hands. She had watched them age across 9 centuries, and she had a complicated relationship with that watching that she did not discuss with people who asked about her age. She told them, I was 23 years old when I met the human delegation. The room was quiet, with the quality of people settling into attention. She told them, it was not a grand meeting. It was not a formal diplomatic session. I was a junior archivist attached to the Vorith Cultural Exchange Program, which in those days sent young archivists to spend time with other species' archival institutions to build the kind of cross-cultural record that formal diplomatic exchanges did not produce. I had been assigned to spend 8 months working alongside the Earth Concord's Historical Archive Division. She looked at her hands. She told them humanity was different then. I do not mean different in ways that would surprise you. They were the same species, the same biology, the same fundamental character. What was different was that they were present in a way they are not present now. They were in the corridors, in the councils, in the trade networks, in the diplomatic rooms. They were everywhere that things happened. Not dominantly, not aggressively, present, interested, consistently, reliably present and interested and engaged. She told them, I spent 8 months in the Earth Archive. I made friends. Specifically, I made one particular friend whose name I am going to tell you because she matters to this account and because her name should be in the record. She paused. She said, her name was Senior Archivist Daniel Wren. She was 71 years old. She had been working in the Earth Historical Archive for 43 years. She had the specific quality of someone who had spent 43 years thinking about what records meant and why they mattered, which was a quality I recognized because I had been thinking about the same question since I was old enough to ask it. She became my teacher, not formally, in the way that people who understand the same things become teachers of each other, which is the best kind of teaching because neither party is performing. She told me something in the 6th month of my posting that I have been thinking about for 900 years. I want to tell it to you as accurately as I can, because the accuracy matters. She said, Sova, do you understand what we are doing here? Not the archiving, the purpose of it. The reason humans have been building records since before we had writing, scratching lines in stone and pressing hands against cave walls and keeping counts of seasons on notched bones. Do you know why? I told her I thought it was because memory was unreliable and records compensated for that. She told me that is the function. I asked about the purpose. The purpose is different. The purpose is this. We are the only species we know of that looks at what it has done and decides it should have done it differently. Not always, not consistently, but the capacity is there, built in, and the records are how we exercise it. We build records so that the future can look back and see clearly and decide differently. That is the purpose, not to remember, to change. She told them, I carried that sentence for 900 years. I want to tell you why. 4 months after she told me that, humanity went quiet. Not all at once, not with a declaration or a formal withdrawal. Over approximately 18 months, the human presence in the corridors and the councils and the trade networks and the diplomatic rooms became less and then significantly less and then what I can only describe as deliberate. They were still there. They still met their treaty obligations. They still maintained their infrastructure and their monitoring systems and their supply depots and everything that a species maintains when it is present in the galaxy. But the specific quality of engagement I had described, the presence, the interest, The consistent, reliable showing up in rooms where things happened, that diminished and then stopped. By the time my posting ended and I returned to Vorith space, humanity was functionally silent. I went back to the archive and I wrote a report. I had been an archivist for 2 years at that point, and it was the most important report I have ever written. And I have written 7,412 reports in 900 years, so I want you to understand what I mean when I say most important. The report said, humanity has withdrawn from active galactic engagement. Based on my 8 months of observation at close quarters, I believe the withdrawal is intentional and considered rather than reactive. I was not able to determine the specific cause during my posting, but I observed several indicators in the months before the withdrawal began that I believe are relevant. I am recording them here because I think they will matter, and I think the matter will not be small. She looked around the room. She told them, I am going to tell you what those indicators were. Then I am going to tell you what I have observed in 900 years of watching humanity silence. And then I am going to tell you why I believe it matters now more than it has at any previous point in the past 9 centuries. The Vorith delegate in the room, a younger woman named Ambassador Drev, asked, Archivist Vel, I want to ask something before you continue. You said you made a friend. Senior Archivist Wren, what happened to her? Sova told her, she lived to be 118 years old. She died 200 years ago. I attended the archive ceremony, which is what the Earth Historical Archive holds when a senior archivist dies. It is not a funeral exactly. It is a review of the work. They read from the reports and the research and the documents the person produced, and they discuss what the work meant and what it changed. I was 743 years old. I was the oldest living person at the ceremony by a significant margin. I was also the only non-human in attendance, which the archive's director noted and thanked me for, and which I want to tell you I did not attend to be thanked. I attended because she was my teacher, and she is in this account, and she deserved to have someone at her ceremony who had known her when she was young. The room was quiet. She told them, now I will tell you about the indicators. In the 8 months I spent at the Earth Archive, 3 things happened that I did not fully understand at the time, and have spent 900 years understanding in retrospect. The first was that the archive began a project that Senior Archivist Wren called the Full Inventory. I asked her what the full inventory was. She told me it was a comprehensive review of every decision the human conquered had made in its galactic engagement period, going back to the beginning, organized not by category or time period, but by outcome. Every decision mapped to its consequences, not the intended consequences, the actual ones. I asked her how long the project would take. She told me years, maybe decades, maybe more than that. It is not a small inventory. I asked her why it was being done now. She told me, because the archive exists to enable change, and we cannot change what we have not fully seen. I asked her what they expected to find. She told me, I do not know. That is why we are looking. But I will tell you that the preliminary assessment, which covers the first 40 years of galactic engagement, has produced findings that the senior directorate did not expect and has been discussing for 6 months and has not yet decided what to do with. I asked what kind of findings. She looked at me with the expression of a 71-year-old archivist who had spent 43 years thinking about what records meant. She told me, the kind that require sitting with before you know what they are asking of you. She paused now, in the consultation chamber, 900 years later, and let that sentence be in the room for a moment. She told the 11 people, that was the first indicator, an inventory of actual outcomes, begun in secret, covering a period that the preliminary assessment was producing unexpected findings about. I did not know then what the findings were. I have spent 900 years assembling what I believe they were from the evidence available to me. She told them, The second indicator was a change in the way the Earth Archive handled certain categories of its records, specifically, records pertaining to species interactions in the outer corridors in the first 200 years of galactic engagement. Those records became restricted access, not deleted, restricted, moved to a classification tier that required senior directorate authorization to access. I noticed because I had been working with those records in my research, and they became unavailable. I asked Senior Archivist Ren about the restriction. She told me it was a routine archival management decision. It was the only time in 8 months that she did not tell me the truth. I knew it was not the truth because she was a person who told the truth as a professional practice, and the specific quality of her voice when she told me it was routine was the quality of someone saying words they had been given rather than words they had chosen. I did not press her. She had reasons for the words she had been given. I wrote it in my report instead. She told them the third indicator happened 2 weeks before my posting ended. There was a meeting in the archive that I was not invited to, senior archivists only. It ran for 6 hours. Afterward, Senior Archivist Ren came to the research room where I was working, and she sat across from me, and she looked at her hands for a while. Then she told me, "Sova, when you go home, write down everything you observed this year. All of it. Everything that seemed significant and everything that did not seem significant. Write it down before you decide what matters because you do not know yet what is going to matter." I asked her why. She told me, "Because your record of this year may be the most complete external account of what is happening here, and I think complete external accounts are going to be important." I asked her, "What is happening here?" She told me, "We are doing the thing that Daniel Wren," which is what she called herself sometimes in the third person when she was speaking about her own work in the large sense. "We are doing the thing that Daniel Wren has been saying the archive exists to do. We are looking at what we have done and deciding we should have done it differently. And some of what we are seeing is large. And some of what we are deciding is larger than a decision a single archive can hold." I asked her, "What do you mean?" She told me, "I mean that the people in that meeting today are going to take what the archive found to the people who make decisions. And what happens after that I cannot tell you because I was not in those meetings and I do not know. But I know that the archive's purpose is to enable change, and I believe change is coming, and I believe it will be significant, and I believe your record of this year will matter when people try to understand what happened." Sova looked at the 11 people. She told them that was 920 years ago. I went home. I wrote the report. I filed it. I began making requests for formal consultation to share what I had observed and what I believed it meant. 417 requests across 900 years. She was quiet for a moment. Then she told them, "I want to tell you what I believe the full inventory found. I want to be clear that this is my reconstruction from 900 years of observation and inference, not documented fact. But I have had 900 years to reconstruct it, and I believe the reconstruction is accurate. I believe the full inventory found that in the first 200 years of humanity's galactic engagement, the human-conquered's presence in the outer corridors produced a set of consequences in smaller and less developed species that the human-conquered had not intended and had not tracked and had not, until the full inventory, fully seen. Not violent consequences, not aggressive ones, softer than that and in some ways harder to address. The consequences of a large and capable and well-intentioned presence in spaces where smaller species were developing their own ways of being in the galaxy. The specific kind of consequence that a large shadow produces even when the thing casting it intends no shadow at all. I believe the full inventory found this, and found it to be significant, and found the scope to be larger than expected, and found that the 6 hours of meeting and the restricted archive records, and the change in Senior Archivist Wren's voice, when she said it was routine, were all part of the same process of a species looking at what it had done, and deciding it should have done it differently. And I believe the decision that came out of that process was the quiet. Not withdrawal from responsibility, not abandonment of commitments, the deliberate reduction of a specific kind of presence that the inventory had identified as producing unintended consequences, maintained until the smaller species in the affected corridors had developed fully enough that the shadow was no longer a shadow but simply a neighbor. 900 years. Director Sovintar was very still. He asked, "Are you saying that humanity went quiet by choice, not from weakness, not from political fracture, as a deliberate, considered decision based on what their own archive found?" She told him, "Yes, that is what I am saying." He asked, "How long did they intend the quiet to last?" She told him, "I do not know. I believe they set a condition rather than a timeline. I believe the condition was something like, when the species affected by our presence have developed to a point where our presence is neutral rather than consequential. When the shadow is gone. I do not know how they measure that. I do not know whether they have measured it yet." He asked, "And you think they have?" She looked at him. She told him, "I think the reason this request was heard today, after 416 previous deferrals over 900 years, is that someone in the Concord's current administrative structure decided it was time for this account to be in the formal record. I do not know who made that decision. I do not know why today and not 10 years ago or 10 years from now. But I have been making this request for 900 years, and it was heard today, and the timing is not something I am PR. Appeared to call coincidence." The room was very quiet. She looked at all 11 faces, young by her measure. Even Sovintar, who had the quality of someone older than his years, was young. They were all young. She told them, "I want to tell you one last thing. It is not about the quiet or the inventory or what comes next." She told them, "Senior Archivist Daniel Wren told me in my 6th month at the archive that the purpose of a record was not to remember. It was to change. She spent 43 years building records that were meant to enable change. The full inventory was the largest single thing she ever contributed to. She never knew whether it worked. She died before she could know. I have spent 900 years watching to see whether it worked, and I have not been certain." She looked at her hands. She told them, "I think today is the closest I have come to believing it worked. Not because humanity is coming back. I do not know whether they are coming back. Because the question of what they found and what they chose is in this room now, in the formal record. And in the formal record, it is no longer a question that one very old archivist has been carrying alone for 900 years." She told them, "That is what I came to do." She folded her hands in her lap. She told them, "I have finished." The room stayed quiet for a long time. Not because no one had anything to say. Because they understood, in the specific way that 11 people understood something when they had been given a complete account by the only living person who had been there, that the quiet was appropriate, and that filling it before it was ready to be filled would be a failure of attention that the account did not deserve. Sovintar broke it after 2 minutes. He told her, "Archivist Vel, I want to ask one final question. You have been carrying this for 900 years. You have made 417 requests. You are sitting in a formal consultation session that will produce a record that will be in the Joint Assembly's archive. What do you want the record to say?" She looked at him. She told him, "I want the record to say that humanity spent 900 years being quiet because they looked at what they had done and decided they should have done it differently. I want the record to say that the quiet was not weakness. It was the most disciplined thing I have ever observed any species do. Restraining the full expression of what you are because your full expression is too large for the room. Waiting for 900 years because you decided the waiting was what the situation required. I want that in the record because I think when they come back, and I believe they will come back, the galaxy should understand what the quiet was. Not a mystery. Not an absence, a choice, sustained for 900 years, because a 71-year-old archivist looked at 43 years of records and told the people who made decisions that the archive existed to enable change, and that change was needed, and that the change required patience at a scale that was difficult to imagine. She stood, very slowly, because 943 years required standing slowly. She told them, "Daniel Wren told me to write everything down. I did. 417 times I tried to give it away. Today I gave it away." She picked up the physical record she had carried into the room. The original, handwritten. The first report she had filed when she returned from her posting 920 years ago. She placed it on the table in the middle of the room. She told them, "That belongs in the archive now. Not mine, yours." She walked to the door. At the door she stopped. She told them without turning around, "She was a good teacher. I want that in the record too." She left. The room stayed quiet for a long time after she was gone. The archivist in the corner had been recording everything. The record was complete. If this one reached you somewhere the others did not, it was because of her. 943 years old, 417 requests, carrying one sentence for 900 years. The purpose of a record is not to remember, it is to change. Daniel Wren told her that in a research room in the 6th month of an 8-month posting, 920 years ago. The record says it now. That is what she came to do. Stay human.